There is a question that nobody has answered, and today we're going to ask it together, not to accuse, not to condemn, but because the truth, all of it, belongs to the people who prayed for Joni Lamb, who gave to Daystar, who watched her on that screen for decades. They deserve the full picture, and right now they don't have it.
Where did Joni Lamb actually die? The question Daystar has not answered. There is a question at the center of the Daystar story that has not been answered, not by the organization, not by the board, not by any member of the Lamb family in any public forum, and the people who most deserve that answer. The viewers who watched Joni Lamb on their screens for decades, the donors who prayed for her and gave to the ministry she led, have been left to piece together a picture from fragments that do not line up with the official account. The question is straightforward. Where did Joni Lamb die? Daystar's official statement on May 7, 2026, described her death as the result of serious health challenges compounded by a back injury. Media outlets reported she died at her home in Bedford, Texas. That was the account presented to the public, to the donor base, and to the broader Christian media community that covered her passing. But an investigative journalism outlet that has maintained the most thorough and careful record of the Daystar story published, on June 5, 2026, a podcast episode in which a family friend, whose identity was verified by the journalist and confirmed with Jonathan and Susie Lamb directly, offered an account that does not match what the public was told. According to that source, Joni Lamb died in Mexico. She was taken there on a Monday. She died on a Thursday, away from her children, away from her ministry family, in a foreign country, and her eldest son, who was physically nearby, was not called to say goodbye. These two accounts cannot both be the complete picture, and Daystar has addressed neither the discrepancy nor the questions that surround it. Who Joni Lamb was. Before going further, the full picture of who Joni Lamb was deserves honest acknowledgement, because accountability journalism applied only to the failures of a person's life is not journalism. It is prosecution. Joni Lamb co-founded Daystar Television Network in 1993 alongside her husband Marcus in Dallas, Texas. What they built over the decades that followed reached across more than 2 billion homes globally. It was carried on every major satellite and cable platform. Its programming touched the lives of people in prison cells, hospital rooms, and living rooms across the world, people who had nowhere else to turn at 6 in the morning when they needed something to hold on to. Joni Lamb spent decades of her life pouring herself into that mission. She hosted her own program 5 days a week. She showed up on camera consistently, year after year, speaking into the lives of people she would never personally meet. Whatever has been alleged about how Daystar was administered and governed, the underlying mission, to communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ to people who needed to hear it, was genuine. That deserves to be held honestly alongside the harder parts of this story, not set aside to make the accountability narrative cleaner. Her husband Marcus died in November 2021 after contracting COVID-19. The years that followed were marked by a remarriage that her son Jonathan and his wife Susie objected to on biblical grounds, allegations involving the safety of their young daughter that fractured the family publicly, Jonathan's removal from the organization, and finally a death surrounded by questions that the organization has chosen not to address. That is the complete context: a complicated life, a complicated legacy, and a death that deserves a straightforward answer. What the public was told. The timeline of what was communicated to Daystar's audience in the weeks before Joni's death is important because it establishes what donors and viewers were working with when they prayed for her. On April 6, 2026, approximately 1 month before Joni died, her husband Doug Weiss appeared on Daystar's Ministry Now program to address why she had not been on air. His explanation, as reported by multiple outlets covering the story, described 2 hairline fractures in her spine resulting from a back injury. That was the information Daystar's audience received. Millions of people who had been watching her for decades, who were praying for her, who continued sending contributions to the ministry. They were told it was a back injury. Separately, investigators at Trinity Foundation had been tracking the Daystar organization's private aircraft through a project that monitors ministry-owned planes. Their record showed the aircraft making multiple trips in the direction of San Diego, California, a city that sits across the border from Tijuana, Mexico, where an alternative cancer treatment facility called called the Oasis of Hope operates. Trinity Foundation was careful in how they framed this information. They did not publish a claim that Joni was being treated for cancer because they did not have sufficient evidence to state it as established fact. That caution reflects the standard that credible accountability journalism requires. But when Joni died on May 7, 2026, the question of what she was actually being treated for and where she was when she died moved from background research into an urgent foreground question: the source and what she said. On June 5, 2026, nearly a month after Joni's death, an investigative journalist published a podcast episode in which a family friend came forward with her account of the final days. The source requested anonymity to protect individuals in her family whose livelihood was connected to the situation. Her identity was verified by the journalist. Her account was confirmed with Jonathan and Susie Lamb directly. Her voice was altered in the recording to protect her identity. This is not anonymous social media speculation. This is a vetted, confirmed source whose account was reviewed against OT, her known information by one of the most credible investigative journalists covering evangelical accountability. According to this source, Joni Lamb was taken to Mexico to the Oasis of Hope facility on a Monday. She died on Thursday, 4 days later, in a foreign country, away from her daughters, away from her ministry family, away from Jonathan, who was physically nearby and was not notified. The source also described something that raised its own set of questions about the final days. She had sent Joni a text message, she said. She knew Joni's communication patterns well enough to recognize how she wrote, what phrases she used, how she expressed herself in messages. The response that came back from what she believed was Joni's phone did not read like Joni. The words, brief, out of character, not Joni's voice, led the source to form the impression that someone else may have had access to Joni's phone and was managing her communications in her final days. That is the account of one person speaking from her own experience and impressions. It is not a documented fact. It is not a legal finding. It is a first-hand account that creates questions requiring answers from Daystar, from the board, from those who were present in Joni's final hours. What is confirmed? Alongside the source's account are confirmed facts from the public record that reinforce rather than undercut the questions she raised. On May 7, 2026, Susie Lamb posted publicly that Jonathan and Susie had not been informed of anything. She wrote that they were physically nearby, down the road, but had not received a call telling them Joni was dying. They did not get to say goodbye. According to reporting from the same investigative outlet, Jonathan Lamb did not learn of his mother's death from a family member. He was informed by Tom Calendarer, Daystar's attorney and a board member, approximately 10 minutes before the organization announced her passing on social media. 10 minutes. A son learning of his mother's death from the organization's lawyer, with barely a window before the public announcement went out. Whatever the history between Jonathan and his mother, and the history was real, painful, and extensively documented, the circumstances of how he was notified about her death constitute a human tragedy that deserves to be named as such before it is analyzed as anything else. A mother died. Her eldest child was down the road. He was not called. He found out from an attorney. The questions that remain, the gap between the official account and what the vetted source described, raises three specific questions that Daystar's board and leadership have not publicly addressed. The first is the most basic. Where did Joni Lamb die? The official statement and media reporting placed her death at her home in Bedford, Texas. A confirmed, vetted source told an investigative journalist she died at a facility in Mexico. These accounts are not reconcilable as both being fully accurate. Daystar's donors and viewers are owed a clear, factual answer. The second concerns what Joni was actually being treated for. Doug Weiss told the Daystar audience in April that the reason she had been absent from air was a back injury, 2 hairline fractures in her spine. If the private jet records pointing toward the Tijuana border and the source's account of a trip to an alternative cancer treatment facility are accurate, then the audience Daystar was asking to pray for Joni was not given truthful information about her condition. That is a stewardship issue. An organization that asks its viewers to pray for a leader, to trust the ministry's communications, and to continue giving financially has an obligation to be honest about what that leader is facing. Trust is the foundational currency of any ministry. Presenting a back injury to an audience while the reality was something else entirely damages that currency in ways that no subsequent statement can fully repair. The third question is the one most difficult to answer from outside the family. Who decided that Jonathan would not be called? Who made the decision that Joni's eldest son, physically nearby, geographically close enough that a phone phone call would have reached him, would not be informed that his mother was dying? Who decided that he would learn of her death from a lawyer with 10 minutes of lead time before the organization's social media announcement? That decision was made by someone in a family and institutional context where one person was managing the access to information about Joni's condition and location. The question of who made that decision and why is one that Daystar's board has the capacity to answer publicly. They have chosen not to. What accountability requires. The goal of raising these questions is not to assign criminal guilt or render verdicts on anyone's motives. The standard of responsible accountability journalism is evidence, named sources where possible, documented records, and the acknowledgement of what is confirmed versus what is reported and what is unknown. That standard demands intellectual honesty in every direction, including the direction of acknowledging that one source's account, however credible the journalist who verified it, does not constitute proven fact. What it does constitute is a discrepancy between what was publicly said and what a person with first-hand knowledge experienced. And that discrepancy, sitting within a 2-year pattern of institutional behavior that has consistently protected information from donors who funded the ministry and viewers who trusted its communications, is precisely the kind of discrepancy that deserves sustained, careful public attention. Joni Lamb's donors sent contributions to a ministry whose leader, they were told, was recovering from a back injury. If she was in Mexico receiving cancer treatment at an alternative facility, those same donors were not given the information they needed to pray with the full picture of what they were praying for. They were not given the information they needed to understand the state of the organization they were funding, an institution that asks for and receives that level of trust from ordinary people, many of them elderly. Many of them on fixed incomes, carries a corresponding obligation to communicate honestly when the situation is serious. Daystar has not confirmed where Joni died. It has not explained the gap between the spine fracture statement made to viewers in April and the apparent reality of what she was being treated for. It has not addressed the source's account, published by the investigative outlet in June. It has not explained the decision to notify Jonathan through an attorney, rather than through family, and it has continued operating, still broadcasting, still collecting donations, still presenting itself to its audience, without providing any of these answers. What the people who gave deserve. The people who watched Joni Lamb on that screen for decades, who prayed for her during the final months of her life, who continued sending in their monthly partnership checks while she was declining, they deserve the truth about where she was when she died. Not a carefully worded statement that neither confirms nor denies. Not silence followed by a programming schedule reorganized around a dead man's archived sermons. A direct, honest, complete answer. Jonathan Lamb deserved to say goodbye to his mother. Whatever the conflict between them, whatever choices were made on both sides over 3 years of painful family fracture, he was her firstborn child, and she was his mother. The decision to keep him outside the door in her final hours, geographically nearby and deliberately uninformed, is one that Daystar has never explained publicly. It is one that the people who trusted this institution deserve to understand. The Daystar board, whatever its composition, still undisclosed to the public as of this writing, has the information needed to answer these questions. Whether the location of Joni Lamb's death was Bedford, Texas, or a facility in Mexico, they know. Whether she was being treated for cancer rather than recovering from a back injury, they know. Whether the decision to exclude Jonathan was deliberate and who made it, they know. What they have chosen to do with what they know is say nothing. That choice is itself information. An organization committed to transparency does not allow a month to pass after its founder's death without addressing a vetted investigative report that directly contradicts its official account of where she died. An institution that genuinely valued the trust of its donors would not allow those donors to continue giving without knowing that the woman they were praying for may have died in a foreign country rather than at home. The questions sit in the public record, unanswered. Joni Lamb, a woman who built something genuinely significant for the people it reached, whose failures were real and documented, but whose life's work touched people in ways that cannot be reduced to the scandal that surrounded her final years, deserved a death that was honest, that was surrounded by her full family, and that was reported to the people who loved her with the truthfulness she had spent decades telling others to embody. Whether she received any of that remains, as of this writing, a question without a public answer. Daystar owes its donors that answer, and the watching community of people who have followed this story with care and with a genuine desire to understand what happened inside an institution they trusted. They deserve it too. Please like and share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. God bless you. God loves you. God smiles when He sees you. Thank you for watching.